and it's a pleasure to rise and make a contribution on this motion, which I support. Mr Speaker, the goings-on of the past couple of months really beg a belief. No level-headed person within the Victorian community could honestly believe the magnificent memory loss of so many people. We've seen the Health Minister gone in recent weeks, the Head of Premier and Cabinet gone. The Head of Premier and Cabinet said in his evidence he could not recall calling Mr Ashton in the so-called missing 6 minutes. But we now know that he did. The phone records have revealed that. This is the man who is joined at the hip to the Premier. The former Health Minister, on her way out the door, said to treat the Premier's evidence with great caution. But, Acting Speaker, this is just the tip of it. We've also had the Emergency Services Head, Mr Crisp, saying he briefed the Minister on a number of occasions about hotel quarantine and then weeks later withdrew his comment. The Victorian community has every right to ask what the heck is going on. But, Acting Speaker, as the Premier keeps telling us, the buck stops with him. He said in a media conference, I think it was in the back gardens here, when this was unfolding, that he was very pleased to receive the offer of ADF personnel to assist with hotel quarantine. He then said, later, that he's not even sure that the offer of ADF personnel was made. Those words came out of his mouth. They are also in his media release. Speaker, it's an oxymoron to say thank you for the offer and then turn around and say, but I'm not sure the offer was even made. Another oxymoron that the Premier comes up with is to say in one breath, the buck stops with me, but then to immediately follow that by saying, I'm not responsible for the decisions that were made on hotel quarantine. You can't say both of those things in one sentence. Acting Speaker, the get out of jail term that's been used here by a number of people is the term creeping assumption. This came about by creeping assumption. Well, I don't think the people of Victoria believe for 1 minute that these decisions were arrived at by creeping assumption. This is a decision that has cost several hundred lives, has wreaked havoc with our business community, cost jobs, and we're led to believe that this critically important and vital decision was made by creeping assumption. I certainly don't believe this for 1 minute, and I'm sure the good people of Victoria don't either. But let's for a second pretend that it is correct. Let's take the Premier on his word and the other ministers that this was made by creeping assumption. Even if this decision was made by creeping assumption, that level of incompetency alone is enough for all of them to go. This was a decision that had massive, massive ramifications. Other speakers have spoken about the lives lost, the businesses destroyed, people out of business. A drive down the Esplanade at Lakes Entrance will show the vacant shops. It puts so many people out of work. And, Acting Speaker, it also had very personal implications for so many people. At least 2 families in my electorate that I know of were stopped from travelling interstate to see loved ones with terminal illness and weren't able to be by their side when they passed. All coming back to the decisions that were made. And yet we're told to believe and accept that no one actually made it. It was by creeping assumption. Acting Speaker, there was fanfare last week on social media about 100 press conferences in a row. It's interesting that we can remember how many press conferences were done and have been made, but We cannot remember any of the tough questions and discussions that took place around the appointment of security guards to look after hotel quarantine. Those press conferences from the Premier with those constant, you could nearly play word bingo with them. Staying the course, this virus doesn't discriminate, we're all in this together. But another one that is commonly made is that all of these decisions are based on health advice. That's what we're told. All of these decisions are based on health advice. Well, that came crashing down when our Chief Health Officer came out and said the curfew wasn't based on health advice. The Chief Commissioner of Police at the same time also said that it wasn't requested by police. But we're told all these decisions are based on health advice. That's where it gets confusing for our constituents and our wider Victorian community. We've had that many backflips on decisions that were meant to be made solely on health advice. The ability to visit close partners was ruled out based on health advice, and then within a day it was allowed. Well, is it based on health advice, or is the backflip based on political pressure? It either is or it isn't made on health advice. The ability to go boating and fishing was changed. The ability to play golf was changed. We had backflips on farmers' markets within, I think it was 45 minutes or close to it of the announcement being made. We had changes to visits to maternity wards after public outrage. We had changes to childcare arrangements after people expressed their concern and disappointment. Now, these aren't areas that needed clarification. These are areas that were originally dealt with specifically and then, due to public outcry, were changed. Yet we're led to believe that all of the decisions are based on health advice. If they're based on health advice, we should be sticking to them. Contact tracing. What a disaster that has been. Let me walk through what happened at Orbost when we're talking about contact tracing. Now, the Leader of Government Business mentioned before that one case came to Orbost and that resulted in the seeding of other cases. That is not correct. That did not occur. There was no other cases that came about from that person's visit. But I'll tell you what happened. A couple came to Orbost to attend a wake. Now, they shouldn't have come. They were tested on the Friday and travelled up Friday afternoon. The girl in question got her result back on the following Monday and she was tested positive. Monday afternoon, she contacted the COVID tracing team and she told them where she'd been, the pubs, the restaurants, all the locations she'd been to, the businesses she'd gone into on Monday. Well, Monday evening passed, Tuesday passed, so there was the 24 hours gone when Tuesday passed that those businesses were meant to be got in touch with. Wednesday passed with no contact. Thursday passed with no contact, and the contact tracing team had all that data given to them Monday. Friday business day passed, and then at 7:30 Friday night, the contact tracing team rang the Marlow pub and said, you've had someone who's tested positive in your pub 4.5 days later. And you better do a deep clean, the publican was told. He said, I did my deep clean 3 days ago. Then he proceeded to tell the contact tracing team that they'd had the dates wrong of the person visiting at 7:30 on a Friday, and he was lucky to be there because his business was closed down because of COVID restrictions. Orbost Regional Health and that community came together and dealt with that before the contact tracing team made one phone call into that community. Yet we're meant to have confidence and faith in the tracing team. And then we find out that we've got half the personnel doing it that we've got in New South Wales. It's been an absolute disgrace. Then we have the inadequacies of getting information to our business sector. We had one business that inquired through our office as to whether they could open or not. And in fairness, it was a complex matter. It was a business that didn't really fall into any category. But we were told to contact the COVID directions team to get feedback, which we did. My electorate officer contacted them the same day, asking for details on this business with two very specific questions that would have answered. 7 weeks later to the day, 7 weeks later, 49 days later, we got the answer that the business could open.
What happens in the meantime?
What a ripping system that is to support business. These people were financially crippled, stressed and needing help, and we could not get them a basic answer. Now, there are still many questions that need to be answered, and I'll go back just to the hotel quarantine. We've had a whole lot of questioning in the inquiry, but no answers put forth. Was it by the Premier's own hand or creeping assumption that we ended up with security guards untrained in what was at that stage possibly the most important job in all of Victoria? How were these private security companies selected if it didn't go to tender? There may be valid explanation for that, but tell us. Tell the Victorian community how that happened. Even with the decision to put security guards into these motels, why was the ADF personnel not utilised over the top of that to provide oversight, to keep Victorians safe? It was free. Other states and territories, other jurisdictions took up that offer. If we were going to have security guards, okay, mistake, but why knock back the offer of free expertise for that higher level of oversight? Why were private security guards not even given basic training in infection control? Everyone knew if we're going to put international arrivals in hotel quarantine, you would think the people that were standing in the corridors to provide oversight would be given at least the very basic training in infection control. But it did not occur. Why did the Premier go against the advice of the National Cabinet? Apparently hotel quarantine, some have claimed, was his idea. Well then why go against the advice of the National Cabinet to use the Australian Defence Forces for oversight? And why, how on earth could it be a good idea to engage security guards that can serve at multiple hotels, be in one hotel corridor one day and another one the next? Clearly, in anyone's language, that is going to be a great way to spread infection, ultimately when it gets into the security guard oversight. It just makes no sense. Acting Speaker, we need to do more support for businesses. The latest round of businesses did not look after those sole traders that are working from home or have mobile offices. It's almost like the budget team, the finance team sat down and thought, what criteria can we put in place to reach the dollar figure we're happy with, rather than looking at the business supports that are required by that sector. On top of that, we've also got a whole range of areas that still don't make sense. And we know this is a complex area, and not for 1 minute suggesting that everything needs to be, we'll get everything right from the very first step. But we ask about how can 25 kids sit in a classroom this week, but then they can't go to a dance class after school in a hall twice the size and half the number of students? It just makes no sense. Gyms are the same. School photographers aren't allowed to turn up and take school photos this year. 10 people can sit in a cafe, but we can't have one photographer taking a one-on-one photo. We need to look after these business people better than what we have done and what we are. Speaker, there are a whole range of issues that need addressing when it comes to COVID. We've also got in my electorate massive challenges with bushfire recovery. Parks not rebuilt when the Premier said he was going to walk with us. These reasons and all those previously mentioned are why we have no confidence in this government.